Courtney Watson is a queer Black mother, lover, friend, community member, and warrior hailing from the unceded, stolen Ohlone-Lisjan territory, so-called Oakland, California. She is her ancestors' baby descended from enslaved Africans stolen from West and Central Africa, Louisiana Chata, their white European oppressors, and their disappointed Gaelic old ones. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist, an AASECT certified sex therapist who understands her role more and more as a remembering medicine woman, and a remembering medicine woman studying under various African and American indigenous knowledge systems. She is the owner of Doorway Therapeutic Services, a group therapy practice focused on prioritizing the mental health needs of Black, Indigenous people of color, queer folks, trans, gender nonconforming, non-binary, and two-spirit individuals in their offering of individual, couples, family, and sex therapy by predominantly queer and BIPOC providers. Thank you for doing that. Courtney has followed the direction of her ancestors to incorporate ketamine-assisted therapy into her offerings for folks with multiple marginalized identities and stresses the importance of BIPOC and queer providers offering these services. She also founded a 501c3 nonprofit, Access to Doorways, because the cost of ketamine treatment is exorbitant in relation to the average income of clients with multiple marginalized identities, arguably those who, due to overlapping systems of oppression, need it the most. And she's now accepting donations. Her nonprofit also helps subsidize the cost of psychedelic training programs and fiscally sponsors queer and BIPOC-led psychedelic projects to bring oft-neglected voices to the forefront of the psychedelic field. A recovering workaholic, her PhD is pending as she prioritizes soul cultivation, ancestral healing, laughter, rest, joy, and pleasure with her loved ones. And I'll invite Courtney up to tell you more about her talk.
Much lineage of the Ramaytush Ohlone, who are stewards of this land, honoring the bones of your ancestors in this land, honoring your sacred ceremonies and shrines held in this land, acknowledging your loss of rightful stewardship of this land because of the theft, torture, and murder at the hands of colonizers, giving thanks for your resilience and your survival and your unwillingness to succumb. I want to invite in the well and wise, spirits of those departed leaders, specifically the queer relatives who walked through these lands throughout the ages. As I present to this audience today, I also present to the spirits that are original stewards of this land. Today I'm going to be talking about 4 pieces of queer ketamine: the queer molecule, the queer client, the queer practitioner, and the queer work. I want to start with just acknowledging the word queer. It has weight to it, right? In the 16th century is when was first introduced into the English language, and it's odd, eccentric, and a little bit outside of the social norm. I'm gonna work off the slides that I have on my phone so that we are cool with time. And then the late 19th century is when the word became a slur, indicating sexual deviance or some sort of effeminate, gay, same-gender loving men. In the late 1990s, we come to the reclamation of the word queer, and it became used as a positive or neutral self-identifier by various groups. We saw it in the New York Pride in 1990, where they were handing out flyers that said, "Queers, read this." And in 1990, Queer Nation was the name of an activist organization. We have queer studies and queer theory that started coming out of the 90s, and that's when this term became part of something that we started to reclaim. And now we have it mainstreamed, widespread use in academia, and also as an identifier for queer folks and the Q in LGBTQ. And I want to give another acknowledgement. Queer is a term that we have reclaimed, but its use, we must acknowledge our LGBT elders who experience harm on the other side of that word. For some, this word doesn't elicit pride without also bringing forth pain, and for some, it doesn't bring forth pain at all. And so I want to say thank you to any elders that are in this room that experience pain on the other side of the word queer. You paved the way for us to reclaim this word. Now, I don't want to thank you for your torture, but I want to thank you for your sacrifice, even though it was not a sacrifice that you wanted to make. The fact that I'm here on this stage, the fact that we're here at a conference with the name queer in it is because of you all. And so we're saying thank you for that. Thank you, thank you. So the definition of queer, I think I'm on slide 6, if we pull the slides up. Yeah, great. Giving thanks. Next slide, methods, what we're doing, the queer timeline, the acknowledgement and thank you. Can we leave the thank you up just a little bit? Yes. Thank you again. Okay, next slide. Next slide, please. The definition of queer, if you hit that button, the definition will come up. So as an adjective, it denotes or relates to sexual gender identity now that we've done this reclamation process, and that does not correspond to established norms. It also, as an adjective, is odd, peculiar, not quite right. And I actually like the verb to ruin or to spoil. This is what I want to do in my life. I want to ruin and I want to spoil, so I added the verb there. Next slide, please. One more click. And for the purposes of our talk today, queer is going to be all the fun things that exist outside of straight little suffocating boxes and non-normative paradigms. So going into ketamine, the queer molecule. Ketamine it has a history in queer community too. I've often talked about as you can see, my practice is spiritual and not just psychotherapeutic. And in my work with ketamine, I seek to actually, my first journey, I sought to meet the spirit of the medicine and get permission to do this work in a way that medicine felt good. And when I met the spirit of ketamine, she was like a 20-year-old blonde girl that likes to party. And she was like, yeah, sure, have fun. And I was like, yes, but I really just want to know what is the best way to honor you. Yeah, joy and fun and bubbles and candy. And I just started seeing all of these pink and purple and green clouds floating everywhere. And so I'm not at all surprised that ketamine is part of queer party scene because she likes to party. And as the molecule itself, it doesn't fit within these straight little boxes. It moves back and forth and through medical, psychedelic, and party spaces. Next slide, please. And here we have a box. Classic psychedelics, the serotonin 2A receptor, LSD, psilocybin, mescaline, DMT. And then there's honorable mention for marijuana and MDMA, but ketamine is rarely talked about as a psychedelic. And I don't know how anyone can have a ketamine experience and not feel that ketamine is a psychedelic. But the box says that if this molecule, this medicine wasn't available when we were doing research in the 50s and 60s, if it wasn't a part of the counterculture of the 70s, then it's not actually a psychedelic. And so ketamine does not fit in the box of psychedelics. She's way over there outside, and I think that's queer as fuck. Next slide, please. Coming back to the transcendence of ketamine, the way that she's able to move through different spaces. She blurs lines between healing, party, essential the World Health Organization has said that this is an essential medication. She exists in all these spaces, and from all these spaces, she's offering us a pathway for legal psychedelic use. The very thing that makes ketamine desired at parties is also what offers healing in the work that we do. There is no box that can contain her. There is no line. There's no designation. Just like queer folks, she moves in and out of spaces. Next slide, please. So ketamine is queering the psychedelic space, and her refusal to adhere to specific norms and guidelines. She's not a classic. And then if you get one more click, we find that she's also queering the psychotherapeutic space as well. Next slide, please. The side effect, this was the thing. So in the 70s, there's a lot of articles that talk about ketamine. I think late 60s, mid 60s is when ketamine was identified as a molecule that could potentially help for healing. And in the 70s, we start seeing publications. And the problem with this healing molecule was that she did things like created journeys and hallucinations. In 1972, in the British Journal of Psychiatry, they say, the principal disadvantage of ketamine is its tendency to cause unpleasant emergence phenomenon during recovery, such as hallucination and frightening dreams. In 1971, in this article, this peer-reviewed journal, up to 30% of adults often bitterly complain about unpleasant dreams or hallucinations following ketamine anesthesia. Consequently, the use of the drug at that age group seems limited. And yet, next slide, please. The side effect is the medicine. These are client testimonials that were pulled from Field Trips website, which is a ketamine clinic. And Seth said, I learned I had been masking my own symptoms and that I had a compulsive need to make sure everyone around me was okay. The therapy allowed me to understand and manage my anxieties for the first time in years. And one of the reasons that I pulled this testimonial in particular is because of this piece of this compulsive need to make sure everyone around me is okay. And I think that that's something that we can understand as people that have marginalized identities that don't feel safe, and everyone has to be okay in order for us to be safe. And if this is what Seth has the potential to experience, being able to let go of that for the first time in years and settle into his body without making sure that everyone else is okay, then what healing potential does ketamine have for queer folks as well? Janine says, it was like I was born with a new brain after going through those sessions. I never thought I would feel this way in my lifetime, and that I would so effortlessly be able to feel and think of the way I finally do about myself. And this is something that I find often in the work that I do with ketamine clients. And so next we're gonna be talking about the queer client. Next slide, please. These are those who we serve who live outside of the boxes. Next slide, please. The queer client needs. Arguably, all of these things fall under safety, but I also wanted to break it down. What our queer clients need when we're doing ketamine-assisted therapy is a space free of heteronormative and cisnormative assumptions, and that's not something that's available in mainstream ketamine or psychedelic-assisted therapy training, programs, treatment protocols, period. Our queer clients need acceptance, a place where all parts and identities are free to be expressed, and that container is held by the practitioner. Our queer clients need exploration, no limitations or presumptions on what can or should emerge. Our queer clients need a place to play. And, you know, ketamine is a fun drug to do that with because she likes to play too. And then also, our queer clients need celebration and emphatic yes to all moments of healing throughout treatment. An emphatic yes, 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 yes to all moments of healing throughout treatment. Next slide, please. And I don't want to just talk about our clients' pain and our clients' needs. I want to acknowledge our clients' resilience. There's so much more beyond pain, the bright and beautiful parts that also show up in session. We are working with survivors, and let's honor all that it takes to survive trauma enacted upon queer bodies in every moment of the work that we're doing together in the psychotherapeutic space, in the ketamine space. Acknowledging community, that community is not an option or kind of like it's not like a fun thing that you do. Community for queer clients is family. It's a central support system to many. And so also when clients are coming in for treatment, we have to know that, thank you, that community is also something that we need to consider in our treatment protocols. We can't talk about queerness without talking about creativity, honoring the language and dance, the gathering places, the style, and etc. as joyful embodiment of the resilience. And how do we incorporate that into the sessions as well? How do we bring that into the treatment room when we're working with clients? If a client wants to get up and dance, people think that ketamine will make you lay down the whole time. That is not true. Sometimes you will get up and dance, even at high doses. And can you imagine what beauty might come from someone with hands like Kayvon coming into the ceremony, into their session, bringing that joy, that life, that dance, that creativity? And also, we have to acknowledge that our clients are warriors. As Dossie said, let's remember who started the Stonewall riots, right? On the front lines of battles with police, politicians, and homophobic aggressors, changing the landscape in the past and even today of American society and influencing the world. Next slide, please. So as a sex therapist, my current qualm with the psychedelic world is the only time that we're talking about sexuality and eroticism, if it's like sexual boundary violations, which is important. And also we need to talk about sex positivity. And in the mainstream, the sex positivity is going to look cis and heteronormative. And so we also need to acknowledge that what does queer erotic energy look like in the space? How do we hold a container for queer erotic energy? How do we allow that to happen without our internal biases showing up? So erotic energy is a part of psychedelic treatment, and it's important that queer folk have the freedom to express our erotic energy in alignment with our sexual and gender orientations within the same supportive framework afforded to our cis-het counterparts. This is the work that I think we as practitioners can really lean into. And so there's also more for us to explore when we're looking at the queer practitioner. Next slide, please. We're here. We exist, right? Ketamine treatment is not just offered by folks that are cis-het or straight, or it's queer folks exist in this space, and we have a role. Next slide, please. And with our role, we also have specific needs, right? The needs of queer practitioners. We need homonormativity, right? We need training programs and treatment models that hold queerness as equal defaults to as the assumption, right? Like, so a lot of the training programs, there's mommy daddy dyad. I hate the mommy daddy dyad. Everybody does not have a mommy and daddy in the home, right? We don't need to have that. We can talk about energies if that's important, but that's not really the framework that they're using. So how do we have homonormativity as a part of our training programs just as much as we have heteronormativity? We also need consultation, and consultation circling up, again, this is that community part, circling up with queer providers, peer support groups to fine-tune the current protocols to the needs of queer providers and clients. The current protocols are not based on the needs of queer providers and clients. We need influence. We need to be on stages like this at every country, every conference in every country too. Every conference in every country, in positions of power where our perspectives are centered as the psychedelic mainstream starts to hit the US and abroad. It can't just be that the influence is coming from folks that don't have queer identities or queer thoughts or queer perspectives or queer lived experiences at hand. And then again, we need celebration. We need to move beyond acknowledgement and celebrate the queer leaders who have made contributions to this field. Next slide, please. And with that, I want to say that this is a little bit wide sweeping, right? Like, we want to talk about queer provider expertise, and we also don't do any of this perfectly. And being queer allows us to kind of have more of a non-binary type of thinking, live experience outside of it must be like this, and it must be like that, and it must be like that. And that allows us to bring that to the work with our clients as well. We have expertise in acceptance because we know stigma. We're more likely to be open-minded, not 100% across the board, but we're more likely to be open-minded because we've had exposure to counterculture identities and communities like kink and non-monogamy, or we might be a part of those cultures as well. We have expertise in resilience because we are embodying standing apart from norms in society. That's something that we live, that lives in our bodies, and that because of that it's a skill set and strength that comes from our mere existence. And then we also have expertise in fluidity, being able to move in and out of boxes through labels, walled off spaces, and support our clients as they do the same. If you have experience of not having to live in a box or moving out of a box or dealing with the fears that come with finding your way outside of a box, and you have a client that's working through that process in front of you, you'll more likely be able to support them than someone that doesn't have that experience. Next slide, please. So coming back to the fact that we can't generalize all of this, we also have to acknowledge that we are queer and we are also heterogeneous as well. And so within queerness, we also have boxes, we also have hierarchies, we also have labels and privileges. And so we really need to acknowledge and break down other communities that are within our communities, like BIPOC communities, honoring and acknowledging that the unique experiences and discrimination that are felt by BIPOC folks are not the same as the experiences of discrimination that are felt by white queer folks, right? And as a BIPOC person, my experiences with discrimination and racism and homophobia is not the same as another BIPOC person as well. There's differences, and we have to attend to all of this as we offer support to these communities. To our trans and TGNC folks, if you're a therapist, I know that you've heard stories of gay, lesbian, cisgender folks really saying, oh, this is just a phase. Oh, you're just on your way. You don't understand. We can't do that when we're doing this work. We have to acknowledge our trans TGNC siblings as having self-determination to their gender identity. We don't get to direct them in the way that we think they should go based on the box that we live in. And then also, at the intersections of polyamory, I feel like we're more open to poly and kink, right, because we exist in these spaces, but sometimes we still feel like monogamy is the norm. And anything outside of that is secondary, or it's less than, or it's not as important. Or like maybe you're poly for a little bit and then you're actually striving to move towards non-monogamy. Bi-erasure is real. As I've struggled to identify as a bisexual person because of bi-erasure, multi-gender attraction is valid. You can be attracted to people across genders, and that doesn't mean that like you're in a transitory state towards gay or in a transitory state towards straight. And it's not a phase, it's not indecision, and it's also not internalized homophobia. And then kinky. This is more accepted within the community, but I think we also need to think about maybe more non-normative kinks that folks might be showing up with, and that could show up in session. If someone is having a queer erotic experience, and then there's also some element of kink in that, but it's more of a non-normative kink, the shame that can come with that, and us doing our own work to be able to normalize any kink, as any non-normative, maybe more stigmatized kink as much as we would a more mainstream kink. Next slide, please. So now we're going to talk about the work. It's eccentric and odd. It spoils and ruins the fun through liberation. Next slide, please. As I was preparing for this talk, I had dinner with Dr. Raquel Bennett, the birth mother of therapeutic ketamine. I was gonna call her the godmother of ketamine therapy, and she's like, well, I have this other term that I think you should use. And I was like, I'm definitely gonna put that down because I like that. The birth mother of therapeutic ketamine. And we were talking about how queer ketamine is. And one of the things that she said is, she was talking about how ketamine is queer because in mainstream biomedical science or health, the doctor is the one that heals you, and in this work, it's you that heals yourself with the treat. Like the client is a part of the healing process, not absent of it, and that perspective alone queers what we think about healing. So the work in ketamine that says that the client is a part of the healing process is inherently queer. Next slide, please. I heard there was a poll that went around about how many people had in some way come to or come out around a psychedelic experience. And I've been seeing it more and more in ketamine listservs. There have been some problematic responses in ketamine listservs around this, but it's also a phenomenon that I've seen often in my work with queer clients. If someone is coming in with more of a question around gender, or like, I don't know, I'm still figuring it out, doing some work and they're being like, oh, and then I was in ceremony with my ancestors and I was me as the gender that I know me to be. And there was a celebration and there was beauty and there was love. And so I think that there is this phenomenon that we're gonna find, I don't know if as more research or more treatment happens, that ketamine treatment or psychedelic treatment in period is actually helping folks break out of boxes and bringing them closer to their queer selves. Next slide, please. So this work is also resistance. Just the fact that we're talking about doing ketamine work with queer folks, centering queer folks, centering queer health, healing, remembering. And when I say remembering, I use the DSM diagnosis. We have psych assessments, so we do. You get your depression diagnosis, your anxiety diagnosis, your PTSD diagnosis, and then you're able to receive ketamine treatment. But honestly, my secret bias is I don't care. I want you to come to your magic. In the spaces that we're able to have this journey legally, I want you to find yourself, the pieces of yourself that have been thrown away or cast off or ripped from you, and I want you to go collect them and then bring them back to you so that you can come here and be your full self. And so in that, this work is inherently resistance. It's resistance, it's liberatory, and we specifically start talking about doing this work at the intersections of gender and queerness, the intersections of race and ethnicity, the intersections of ability, the intersections of language, the intersections of country of origin, the intersections of religion and spirituality. When we start doing that work at the intersections of that and doing all of that remembering for our queer clients, that is resistance. Ketamine work with queer folks is resistance and liberatory. Next slide, please. Okay, this is already in my intro, so we're ready for Q&A. You can go to the end, please. Thank you. Any questions?
Hi, everyone. Something I was thinking about as I was looking at all of the needs for providers to work with queer people in a ethical and loving way, it just kept striking me that those are the things all providers should have to work with all people. And of course we want to make it feel really safe for us, but that's the work that broadens this beyond the community and makes that normal everywhere. And I was just curious about your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Part of the reason that I do the work that I do is because I'm not convinced that the psychedelic space is equipped, whatever mainstreams, because of the heteronormativity, because of the cisnormativity, is actually equipped to meet the needs of queer clients. And so you're right, I think we all need what is said on the needs or even the expertise. We all need to be having providers that have this expertise, and the reality is that we don't. And so if it starts with us working within our communities, making sure that we're showing up in these ways, then we get to bring along the next provider that maybe isn't a part of the community, but can learn from us or can refer to us or can consult with us so that that type of work, it continues to ripple out.
Hi there, thank you. My question is around, with the intersections, one intersection is low income, right? And so I'm asking, what advice do you have for folks that don't have the access to the the experiences that cost a lot of money, who have to obtain this amazing drug underground to create healing circumstances without those resources.
I actually love that you said that, because I think that that is, while I'm not supposed to say as an above ground practitioner go to the underground, I think that that is part of where people are going to get the accessibility needs met, right? I'm not about the division between the above ground and the underground. I think the underground is invaluable. I think the underground is why the above ground exists right now. And for those folks that can't be able to get their needs met in the above ground, I think as long as we have spaces where people are able to get information like this or have trainings, then I think that, like, as long as we have well-equipped facilitators, then people can get those needs met. So I think that that is absolutely a viable option. I'm actually partnering with some organizations to make sure that when we get legal protection as these things roll out for above ground practitioners, that we're not leaving behind underground practitioners, so that the accessibility for folks that can't come into the above ground is met in the underground. And also, I mean, nonprofits, this was the only model that I can find. Like, I really thought about the way that I wanted to structure my business, because ketamine is expensive. If you go back one slide, I think it's stupid how expensive ketamine is. I think it's stupid how expensive our treatment is. And I started a nonprofit because it can't be that the people that need these medicines the most can't afford to get that treatment, or that they have to risk already being at risk for criminalization, already being at risk for policing, that they have to also be exposed to potential harm or incarceration by trying to get these needs met. So I started a nonprofit so that we can get more QT BIPOC therapists trained, and that's queer and or BIPOC therapists trained, and also bring in some funding to get queer and or BIPOC clients served. My 501c3 is not just for my ketamine clinic. If there is a queer and or BIPOC provider anywhere across the country in the United States that has a queer and or BIPOC client that wants to work with them, if we have funding, we want to offer money to help subsidize the cost of treatment.
So, Courtney, first, just thank you for this. This was, yeah, I mean, like, boom. Thank you. Two questions. So, are the slides going to be available? And number two, I was wondering if you could share if you've had any experience in queer group CAP practice, and if you have, like, what that was like, and any pearls of wisdom, because I'm feeling drawn to that. Thank you.
Yes. So I think all of these presentations are good. This one is recorded, so it's definitely going to be up on YouTube. I think it's going to start on the Patreon, and then it's going to move to YouTube for free service afterwards, free access. So you won't just get the slides, but you'll get the presentation. And we have done a couple of groups in our clinic. The groups are very hard to fill. I wonder if maybe with more advertisement or marketing, then people know that they're available, then they might be easier to fill. But getting 4 client schedules and a physician schedule and a therapist schedule together for 8 weeks can be a little hard. We've done it a couple times, and we're still tweaking our process to make sure that gets done. But what we have found is, I found something that I find often in groups, period, and it was pretty interesting. I had 2 individual clients that were in a ketamine group with another provider in our clinic, and they would say the same things. There'd be like threads that would come through with what all the clients in the group was saying. I take a very spiritual approach to this work. I don't think that ketamine therapy is not spiritual. I think it's deeply spiritual work. I do ceremonial work in the ketamine space for clients that feels resonant with. And I think that from my experience, everyone that's supposed to be in the ceremony is going to be in the ceremony and get exactly what they need from the ceremony. And so I think that that's one of the things that I found in group is, like, people that feel like they have completely different things or nothing in common, all of a sudden you start finding these threads, and the medicine pulls out, like, oh, this is the thing that collectively this group, even if they're not saying that, and then that work gets done, and then it starts trickle into their individual intentions as well. I don't know if that's a pearl of wisdom, but that's one of the observations that I've seen. Like I said, we're still trying to figure out this group thing, because to your question, that's one of the ways that we make this work accessible. If we can get a group of 6, then it's 1,700 instead of 6,000. It's just about how we get 6 people together to be able to do that work at the same time.
Hi, good morning. Just a couple months ago, I got to be introduced to a ketamine service provider, and I got a little nervous. I think some of that I didn't know about it, and I think some of that discomfort and embarrassment and stigma about ketamine as a party drug came out. So I didn't take the opportunity to talk to them or to ask them questions, and now here I am learning from you this morning. So thank you.
Ask away.
Well, in the spirit of asking questions, where does ketamine come from? And yes.
So I don't believe that anything is like man-made. I'm like, that's not possible. Like, we are not magicians. We don't make stuff. Everything has an organic base, right? And so when looking at MDMA and ketamine, I wanted to trace back to the organic base. What I found that the organic base is either plant or animal, like ammonia from plant or animals. And so then that ends up being put in a lab and gone through all the processes and chemicals, the XYZ, and then you get ketamine. So where I would say is it starts organically with plants and animals. That's what I know so far, but there's actually not a lot of research that takes you all the way back there. A lot of research takes you to the point of where it was first synthesized in a lab. Do you have other questions?
No, I'll keep learning. Thanks so much.
Okay.
I just wanted to thank you so much for doing this today, and for it just feels, as another queer ketamine provider, it feels very lonely out there.
Yes.
It is. And I've been doing this for about 2 years. And I just wanted to share one of those moments when people's true selves come out, because we also see adolescents mostly from the mental hospital who are very, very suicidal. And I was sitting with this adolescent in like his 3rd journey, and he just shouts out, "I'm trans. I was meant to be a woman." And this family always came in with Bible vacation T-shirts, like a different one every day, every time they came in. But I was so glad it was me there, and I was so grateful it happened that I was there, and because I was able to say to the family, these are some resources. Here are some Christian families who have trans kids. I've been working in the trans world for like eons. And I was so grateful to be there. And I just want to say, I know that it's a wild west of ketamine out there, but I really hope more queer people start working with this amazing medicine that's really spiritual and really deep and really transformative. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for working with the adolescents. You know, that's questions that we've gotten if we can go in that space, and I think that that's invaluable. I think that as long as the medicine is a good fit, for people to be able to have moments like that as a teenager, right? And be able to get resourced as a teenager is imperative to the healing of the communities and those are the babies that are coming up. So thank you for the work that you're doing. And I do want to speak to what you had said about this fear of ketamine as a party drug. I mean, I think in the psychedelic space, we often hear about psychedelic exceptionalism, right? Like these are the good ones and these are the bad ones, right? And if you're partying, then it's not a good way, where you can't actually heal that way. And I have friends and colleagues that are like, and I've had the most amazing, transcendent healing experience on a dance floor, you know? And so the ways that ketamine also gets to be healing in all the places that she's healing. And like I said before, the ceremony, it happens for you exactly when and where you need it, right? Wherever that is, the medicine is going to meet you. And like Raquel Bennett said, there's something inside of you that's active in this healing process. Maybe you've been going to the dance floors for a reason. Maybe you've been going to the alleys for a reason, trying to seek something, right? Something different, something that feels good, something that heals, something that takes pain away. And then you have that moment with whatever the medicine is, right? And then you're able to heal. So yeah, don't let the fact that ketamine is a party drug be a deterrent. And if anything, she's fun and heals at the same time. Who doesn't want a joyful healing process? I see a question over here.
My question is around individuals who are dealing with addiction and using ketamine or MDMA, and your thoughts around that. That's my first question.
Yeah, so I try not to be a gatekeeper, but I also think that it's important for me to be cognizant of helping people move through addiction. For me as a therapist, I'm pretty direct. So if I find that I haven't had this experience yet, and also there's a lot cheaper ways to get your addiction met than a $6,000 8-week treatment for ketamine, right? So I'm probably not going to see too many people with addiction struggles in my clinic. But what I will say is if I see or find that that's coming up, I'm going to speak directly to it, right? Like if you're here for healing, you're here for healing. You might be saying that you're here to address your depression or your anxiety, but if addiction is showing up for you, how is that also a part of it, and how do we bring that into the work that we're doing?
Thank you. And then my second question is, when do you turn somebody away from doing ketamine?
We have a series of assessments. So we have a psychological assessment, and then we have a medical assessment. This is above ground work. I don't do underground work. And so that means that someone has to have a mental health diagnosis in order to receive ketamine treatment with us. So if they don't meet qualifications for a mental health diagnosis, then we won't be able to serve them. The fact that we serve queer and BIPOC folks mean that we all have a mental health diagnosis. So there's a loophole there. How many people aren't suffering from some form of anxiety or depression or PTSD? And so we don't turn people away for psychological assessments because we all meet the criteria. We have turned people away medically if it's not safe. Ketamine actually is a very, very safe medication. She plays well with a lot of antidepressants in ways that some of the other medicines don't. That's part of why she's listed as one of, and I use she because that's the way that I experience her in the spirit of that medicine. But she's listed on one of the World Health Essential Medications because she plays so well with others. And so that means that it's a really safe medicine to use. So I think it's high blood pressure is one of the contraindications for ketamine. I am not a physician. We have doctors and nurses that do that, and they'll take care of that. And then therapeutically, if a client, we usually catch that in the medical assessment, so that's done before treatment starts. But if the client is not going to be able to do treatment work, then we'll process with them in therapy what it's like to not, we're not just going to drop them and say, okay, you don't meet qualification, goodbye. Like, let's talk about how hurt you are about this, how this might have been your last resort and you're finally ready to get healing. And then now you have to find another alternative mold with another physician or another doctor. And because we also have a general mental health practice, those clients can stay with us, just not doing ketamine work, and process whatever is coming up for them there as well. How we doing on time? 7 minutes left. Do we have a 3-minute question and a 4-minute question? That's okay, I'm not gonna hold you. Oh, go ahead.
What do you think it will take to lower the stigma in our community for us to show up?
Man, that's a hard question. I'm doing a documentary with my aunt, and she's been an active crack user for a number of years, and we've talked about our relationship. That's not the center of the documentary because my aunt is so much more than what she does. But I talked to her about ketamine therapy. She said, "Ooh, no, I ain't doing that." I'm like, wait a minute now. And it's really interesting. It's really interesting the ways that the worst thing that you are in the Black community or when it comes to drug is a crackhead or a heroin addict. And we have someone that has been an active crack user is like, I'm not touching that ketamine stuff. No she said psychotropics. I'm not doing no psychotropics for me. I'm good. The stigma is so real. The stigma is so real, and it's one of the biggest barriers that we're facing. I think having conversations like this, like talking to folks about what ketamine is, how ketamine can be healing, and I think it's just gonna be a lot of media exposure too. Like people are gonna have to see stories and understand. I come from a family that's zero tolerance on drugs. I came into this field recently because I was like, it was a Trachuna conference actually, and it was my first introduction into the psychedelic space, and I said, they talking about LSD and mushrooms? Where the fuck am I at? What is happening? Why am I here? And I heard a voice that was, what I identify as the voice of an ancestor saying, just wait and see. And at the end of that conference, after watching a presentation about PTSD and psilocybin, I said, oh, we need this. Because my first thought went to the drug dealers that worked on the corner where I lived and how they could heal their PTSD and trauma if I could just circle them up and get them in a ceremony, right? My thought went to the research that says most of the young black boys walking around in East Oakland, which is where I'm from, I'm a Bay Area native, most of the young black boys walking around East Oakland have PTSD. And I looked around the room and I was like, nobody else here is thinking about them, right? And so we gotta do this work. And it requires a lot of work, and it requires like destigmatization. Like people need to see medicine work. People need to see the ceremony, not just the data, because that data is going to be distancing for communities that are harmed by researchers that want data on them, right? I see data and I think Tuskegee, right? Now you tell me you're gonna sit me in somebody's grandmama's house and it's gonna be a bowl of gumbo and some LSD, I might try it. I might be there. And so also I think that's part of the answer too, is community work. Back to what you were saying, this has to be community work. My dream is that this is not just a space that exists in the above ground. My dream is that so many people find out about psychedelic healing, that when it is decriminalized, not necessarily legalized, but when it is decriminalized, you can go to your auntie's house who has been trained by a community center somewhere and learn how to hold space, and you can bring you, your cousin, and your friend, and you guys can sit in ceremony with the auntie. All of my medicine people in my fantasy are older black women, so that's just my personal fantasy. They could be whoever your elders are. They don't even have to be elders. They could be young folks. But like just imagining people coming and sitting at somebody's table, sitting, having a ceremony, talking to somebody's mama, talking to somebody's grandmama, getting food afterwards, getting medicine afterwards, getting spiritual baths and salt baths, and here, baby, take this tincture, and you need to drink this tea, and like you need putting people on herbal protocols. That's my dream for the way that this ends up in our communities.